Hi, I'm Doug from 10-Minute Atari Retro Cast. At least that's what my friend Chris Collins calls me. Now, I know you all know me for my love of the Commodore Amiga and the Commodore 8-bit computers, but my love of technology actually started a little earlier than that with the Atari VCS. You know it as the Atari 2600. More accurately, mine was the Sears Telegames version of the Atari. It was just an Atari VCS in a different package from Sears. I think we got it in like 1979. My dad worked at Sears, so he got an employee discount, and he got the Atari and a bunch of games for his Christmas, and I think it was 79. Now, the Atari 2600 name didn't come for a couple of years after that. I played a lot of Atari as a kid. So much Atari that my dad nicknamed me the Atari Kid, and literally called me that, up until like 2002 when he died. He used to play with me on the Atari sometimes. We would play Combat together, and that's the only game he would beat me every single time. I have no idea how the man did it, but he'd always beat me at Combat. By about 1981, I'd been following the 8-bit computer market fairly closely. I was 11 years old then. I was getting a lot of computer magazines and seeing different things. I knew people who owned TRS-80s. We had a Commodore PET in grade school that they had on this moving cart, and they'd move this one Commodore PET from class to class, and we'd all get a couple hours on it every week. It was really cool. Friends and I would go down to the public library where they had some Apple IIs, and you could, for free, rent time on some Apple IIs and play some games or use some software on there. The idea of owning a computer was kind of a distant dream to me, though. That TRS-80s were $1,200, $1,300. The Apples were $1,500. The Pets were $1,000 to $1,500. So the dream of having a computer at 11 years old seemed pretty distant. Being an Atari fan, though, I lusted after the Atari 800. I would see advertisements for that. I would see pictures of it. I'd see it at the stores. And my goodness, the graphics and the sounds were so much better than the VCS. It was just incredible. But the Atari 800 was $999, which was out of the price range for an 11-year-old and out of the price range of his parents. Now, I also knew of the Atari 400, but I was a gatekeeping computer snob, just like I am today. And I was not going to tolerate a silly membrane keyboard. Nay, only a real keyboard for 11-year-old Dougie. The $550 price of the Atari 400 was definitely more reasonable, but if I was going to get a computer, I was going to get a real one. And of course, soon after that, I discovered the Commodore VIC-20 with its real keyboard, and the rest, as they say, is history. Was the Atari 400 a better computer than the VIC-20? Honestly, yeah, it was a better computer than the VIC-20, but it was $150 compared to the $550 of the Atari 400. That brings me to modern times. Now, I've been the owner of an Atari 800 XL for several years now. I consider the 800 XL to be kind of the epitome of the Atari 8-bit computers. They never got much better than that, and it was really a nice piece of equipment. Honestly, it's nearly as good as the Commodore 64, even though the technology came out for it years before. But just don't tell anyone. But in a couple of minor ways, it might actually be superior to the Commodore 64. I'm looking at you, 1541 disk drive. Now, unlike the Commodore machines, which I have an unhealthy obsession with collecting, very unhealthy, I don't have the same obsession with the Atari machines. I had my 800 XL, perfectly fine with that. I've got an Atari 2600 and an Atari 2600 Junior. I've got my 7800. I've got my 5200. Love the game consoles. I was happy. I was done. I didn't need anything else. Until a couple weeks ago when I'm looking on Shop Goodwill, as I am wont to do, and I see one for a pretty reasonable price. I make a bid on it. Lo and behold, I won the bid, and they shipped the Atari 400 to me. Let's take a look at the little beauty. And here's a look at the little beauty right here. She's really in really good shape, and honestly, she's kind of sexy. She's got a very futuristic looking appearance to her. I mean, if you can imagine seeing this in 1979, that there looked just like the future. The build quality is excellent with high quality ABS plastics. It has this aluminum shielding inside. It's like a big Faraday cage, RF shielding. That's solid aluminum in there, and it makes the thing weigh a little ton. Funny story about this thing. She did not come with a power supply at all, no power supply. Now it uses a fairly uncommon 9-volt power supply, and luckily it uses the same one as the Atari 1050 disk drive, which I already owned. So I had a 1050 power supply. I tested the power supply. It gave a nice solid 9 volts. Tested it with my 1050 drive, powered on fine. Man, so I thought, okay, I'm good, I'm set. So I power this thing on, and I get nothing. I'm like, okay, oh crap. I'm gonna have to figure out what happened here. Did I have to replace capacitors in the power supply? Did it blow a fuse? So I, immediately get online. I'm looking for, how to fix power supplies and so on and so forth. Go to bed. Next day I get up, and I'm sitting staring longingly at my little beauty. I'm thinking, man, do I want to play a good game of Centipede on my little Atari 400, which came with the machine. And then I said, Doug, you know, and you've known for years, that the Atari 400 and 800 will not turn on if its little door is open. Yeah. And I closed the door, and she powered right up, and she worked absolutely perfectly. What an idiot. I knew that. I absolutely have known that for years. Totally forgot about it. Thought my unit was dead. You see, my friends, I faceplant like this so you don't have to. Now here's another awesome feature of the Atari 400 and the Atari 800. You've got 4, count them 4, standard Atari joystick ports, which means you can actually have your friends over and play cool Atari games, no issues at all. Here I was with my sad, lonely VIC-20 playing Omega Race all by myself with its single joystick port and my VIC-20, where I knew all of my friends who owned Atari 400s were gathered around, hooting and screaming and laughing and playing on their Atari 400s. Of course, the Atari 400 and 800 could handle more than just cartridges, which we're going to take a look at in a minute. It also has this awesome SIO port on the side, and all 8-bit Ataris have this. Now, the SIO port is really cool. It's often considered the predecessor to modern USB, mainly because it was designed and implemented by the same guy who created modern USB. You could string up tape drives, you could string up modems, printers, and more. And by more, I mean funky-do little things like this Atari CX85, which adds a fully functional numeric keypad to your Atari 400 or your Atari 800. That's one way to get a real keyboard in this little guy. Plugs right in the SIO port and daisy chains with all your other devices. Now, the SIO port is faster than Commodore's IEC port for sure, and it used smart devices, which means things that were connected to it had their own little chips and their own little drivers built into them, and they were just intelligent devices. That made them a little more expensive than some dumb devices, but not too bad. The SIO port is used today in modern Ataris for things like the lovely little FujiNet right here, which we'll cover in a future episode. This thing is absolutely brilliant. Plugs right in, has a pass-through for other devices. Now, there's really not much here on the back at all, except this RF cable. You notice there's no user ports, there's no video monitor ports. All you've got is this RF cable that hooks up to the RF signal on a television. Then you've got a little switch here on NTS systems to switch between channel 2 and channel 3. Now, on future ones and on the Atari 800, there's a 5-pin DIN connection, which is exactly the same as the VIC-20s and exactly the same as the early Commodore 64s, that allows you to use composite output for video and RCA output for audio. This does not support it out of the box. There are options to add it to this, but then you have to extract the audio from someplace. I don't really care because I've got an Atari 800 XL that I use quite a bit. this is going to be more of a showpiece than anything else, so I don't think I'll do that modification. And to be perfectly honest, like you see here, the RF output is actually really quite good. I mean, the text is perfectly readable. There's very little banding, very little smearing. Of course, RF has natural aliasing to make things look a little bit smoother. I see no reason to change away from this. And the RF is so clear. The only computer I own that has better RF than this would be my Amiga 1000, which has absolutely brilliant RF. Now, so far, I've managed to avoid the elephant in the room, which is, of course, the membrane keyboard on the Atari 400. Look at that little guy there. It's certainly different than the keyboard in the Atari 800 or the VIC-20 or the Commodore 64. It's these little membranes that have absolutely no tactile feel whatsoever. When you type on it, you can't even feel you're typing. It's just I don't know, like you're touching a piece of plastic. Now, I've read all of Atari's reasons for doing the membrane keyboard. Oh, you can spill a drink on it. A kid can spill a drink on it. They can get Cheeto dust on it. And everything would be fine. It's not going to hurt the keyboard. I even read in one Atari bit of literature that they did it so toddlers could not pluck off the keys off the keyboard, put them in their mouth, and choke on it. I mean, what an absurd reason for putting a membrane keyboard on, thinking that, excuse me, that's where that restore key went. Oh, that's much better. Oh yeah, I can breathe a lot freer now. In retrospect, viewing the Atari 400 mainly as a gaming computer, as like an upgrade to the VCS, the membrane keyboard does make a little bit of sense, and it's not the end of the world like I thought it was back in 1981. Now, I would not want to type out a 10-page basic program on this keyboard. Nay, I wouldn't want to do that at all. But for using it with games like Star Raiders, which uses like 10 or 12 keys on the keyboard, works absolutely fine. They're actually responsive. You can't feel feedback, but you tap a key and it works. So I do get what they were going for. And considering it outsold the Atari 800 about 2 to 1, it was probably a reasonable business decision. Now, the Atari 400, when it first shipped, came with 4K, and the Atari 800 came with 8K, but apparently they switched that up like almost immediately. Honestly, I've never heard of anybody actually owning one of the original 4K machines or 8K machines. They're all the 16K for the Atari 400, 48K for the Atari 800 machines. Now, 16K in 1979 and 1980 sounds like a lot, especially since we got along with 5 kilobytes on the VIC-20 just fine. But before long, people realized that 16K, you're not going to play too many disc-based games with that. Cartridges, in general, no problem at all. Some tape games, basic tape games, fine. Disc games, not so much. From what I understand, disk drives were not particularly popular on the Atari 400. That was mainly Atari 800 type investment. Even some cartridges would not work on 16K machines. I own a couple of them. They say XE/XL on them. I think they're even designed to work only on 64K machines, which came even later in Atari's history. See, even on my 16K Atari, modern accoutrement like the awesome FujiNet that I have here, which emulates an Atari disk drive and connects you to the internet, does all kinds of other stuff, it simply does not work on an Atari with only 16K memory. Let me boot it up here. You see we get the pretty FujiNet logo and runs out of memory, and I don't think that's what we're supposed to be seeing. If I upgrade this to 48K, I'm golden. And so can this little Atari be upgraded? Absolutely. Atari even anticipated it, and back in the day, they made a 48K upgrade for this to bring the whole thing up to 48 kilobytes. Internally in here, there's 2 slots. One of them is the CPU card, which has the CPU and a couple of the other chips. The other's a memory card with 16K. Pop in that 48K memory card instead of the 16K one. jumper a few things on the bottom of the motherboard with a couple pieces of wire, this thing will boot up with 48K of RAM, and you're absolutely golden. And those parts are still sold today. I own one. I'm going to install it in here as soon as I can find where I put my 48K RAM card. Can't find it anywhere. And of course, cartridges are really what this little guy was designed to run with. The 400 has one cartridge slot that says left cartridge. The Atari 800 has two slots that say left and right. And of course, there are only like two things were ever released for that right cartridge. Everything goes into the left cartridge on both machines. Now, I've got some cool games. I've got Star Raiders, Star Trek, which is nice, Joust, which is absolutely awesome, Moon Patrol, which is a reasonable version. But look at this Atari portfolio case that I have here. It says Atari Home Computers. You open it up, and it's got room for 6 cartridges on the side here. I got my pole position, Dig Dug, Skyrider, Kicks, Asteroids, Defender, and over here, now I do have a couple cartridges in there that are for the XE system, but over here, that's designed to put all your manuals in. So you've got 6 cartridges and all your manuals. I would love to pick up a few more of these. There's one of these for sale on Shop Goodwill right now. They want $75 for it. Yeah, I'll pass on that price. Without any cartridge in here, it just boots up to this memo pad thing, which is absolutely nothing except types letters on the screen. You can't save anything. You can't print anything. It's not a basic cartridge. The basic cartridge is actually a separate cartridge that comes with the system, and I don't have one. I need to pick one up. But let's try a few little games and see what's going on. Centipede is just awesome. You can see the smooth scrolling on here. The sounds, perfectly good, perfectly acceptable. Everything's nice and smooth. Now, I challenge you to load up Centipede or Millipede on your Atari ST and see if you get smooth scrolling like this, and then give me a call and tell me how much you love your ST. Joust, of course, is an awesome game, and again, note the smooth scrolling here. Everything is just absolutely... Oh, that was really good, Doug. I'm so proud of my awesome Joust skills. But you can see it's nice and fast. Colors are pretty good. The 64 version, I think, is a little bit more colorful than this. But when we do our head-to-head, I think we're going to explore a couple of games like this. As many of you know, Dig Dug is one of my very favorite games in the entire world. Absolutely love it. Cannot stand the official Commodore 64 version of it because the audio is all wrong. But this one, the audio is actually quite good. The gameplay is not quite as good as the C64 version, but the audio is perfect, so I can't complain. Oops. Didn't want to do that. Got to knock down 2 rocks before your bonus vegetable shows up. Ha 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 ha! Killed you. Kicks is one of my favorite games of all time too. Absolutely love Kicks. Now the story is that my girlfriend in 1986, her best friend, when she lived in California, her best friend's father actually coded the Kicks arcade game. Now, I don't know if that's a true story, but that's what Cindy always told me, and she had no reason to lie. Got some classics like a good old pole position here, which I've always been rather poor at. Rum, rum, rum. Come on. Where's all my other cars here? There you are. Hold the joystick back to switch to high gear. Interesting. No! Ha 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 ha! Eat my dust. What immense skills. Nice smooth scrolling though, for the most part. Whoa! Oh, there we go. Nice job, Douglas. And of course, everybody who has an Atari 8-bit computer has about 3 or 4 copies of Pac-Man they seem to reproduce. This is my 3rd copy of Pac-Man. It's not a bad version of the game, certainly a lot better than the 2600 rendition of it, without a doubt. Nowhere close to the quality of Miss Pac-Man on the Atari 8-bits, but it absolutely does the job. And of course, the killer app for the Atari 8-bits was Star Raiders, which is just an incredible game for 1979. This thing is so in-depth. You know, you've got your long-range scans. I'm going to do a whole episode on this. It's such an intense game. You've got your long-range scans, your maps of everything. Now we can hyperspace to our various places here. Red alert, enemies. And it's got forward and aft views, so you can actually look behind you. Ha 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 ha. See, I can go aft view now, and that's behind me there. You can control the speed of your ship. There, I've stopped. Let me go speed of 9. Really, really an awesome game. And there's always your classics like the classic Asteroids. This is a little bit better than the Atari 2600 version because the asteroids move at different angles. On the 2600 version, the asteroids pretty much just went up and down and then just slightly at an angle. This one actually is more angles like in the actual arcade game. Not bad though. Then, of course, we've got educational programs like Skywriter, select keyboard or joystick to play. Now, if you select keyboard, you would think that you would be able to spell out these words since it's an educational program. So you fly your little plane here, and you have to match these words here. So a polite male is going to be, let's see, grown man. Grass boy. Gentleman. So gentle, and then man. We've got to get the man here before we run out of fuel. Come on, come on. Yay! Got it spelled right. Next one, a band of color in the sky. I bet that's going to be a rainbow. There's bow. Up bow. Rainbow. There's rain. Push the button. Rain boy. Rain cow. Yeah, that's what we want to do. Rain man. Ah! I'm dead. There's some cartridges that don't work in the Atari 400. There's some cartridges like this that say XE, XL on them, which are designed only to work in the 64K cartridges or computers that came out a little bit later in the early 80s. They just don't boot on this one. I'll be curious to see if they boot when I get it upgraded to 48K. No idea, or if they require 64K. Now the Atari 8-bit line is very colorful. It supports up to 256 colors from its palette. You can't have all 256 on screen, but it can kind of do what the Amiga can do, which is change the colors on every scan line. That's why in some Atari cartridges you see there's like this beautiful rainbow color with hundreds of colors showing up on the Atari logo. They're changing the colors on every scan line like you can do on the Amiga. And why can you do it like you can on the Amiga? Well, because a lot of these custom chips were made by like Joe Miner, Joe DeCure, the people who were involved with creating the Amiga chips too. So we owe a lot of our Amiga heritage to these beautiful little 8-bit machines right here. there's a couple chips that handle the graphics. There's the Antic chip, and there's the CTIA chip. And Antic is a new one. CTIA is an upgrade to the chip that's in the Atari 2600. They do some great jobs with smooth scrolling, sprite work, things like that, things that other computers of the day just couldn't handle. And the audio chip, you heard some of the audio on there, and it was pretty darn good. That's done with the old Pokey chip. Now, the Pokey chip's a nice audio chip. It's got multiple channels. You can even trick it to do, voice work like you can with the SID chip. It's kind of hard to do, but you can do it. The Pokey chip actually ended up in an absolute ton of arcade games back in the day, too, like Missile Command, Centipede, Millipede, Gauntlet, a couple of those. They've got Pokey chips in them that help with the audio. Now, is the Pokey as awesome as the SID chip? Considering it came out 3 years earlier, it gives it a good run for its money, but SID edges it out just a little bit. I think we'll do a head-to-head comparison of the Atari maybe 800 XL versus the Commodore 64, and we'll put them side by side and see just who comes out on top. And I think you'll be surprised how close the Atari is to the quality of the Commodore 64. So what's my opinion of the Atari 400 computer? Well, honestly, I should have considered it a little bit more back in 1981. Maybe I should have held out another 6 months and saved some money and picked one up, because it was a really good system. And quite honestly, it was superior to the VIC-20 in most ways. Not always, but most ways. Now, I often credit my Commodore 64, my VIC-20, my Amiga days for putting me on the path to what I do today, which is owning my own technology consulting company. Now, let's just imagine what could have happened if I would have gone another route, if I would have gone with the Atari 400, then upgraded to an 800 XL, and then finally gone with the Atari ST. What could my life have been like if I did that? Dreaming about what could have been. I really do like the Atari 400, though. I really do. She's a nice addition to my collection. I'm going to be installing that RAM expansion as soon as I can remember where I put it. But I probably won't do the video mods. I've got my Atari 800 XL, which works absolutely fine with composite video, and I'll use that most of the time. This will be kind of sitting on a shelf in my computer museum cabinet, showing off some cool museum pieces. Now, right after I won my bid for my Atari 400, I'd also put in a bid for an Atari 800. Kind of the same thing. I just put a low bid in. We'll see what happens. I won it, of course, like 2 days after the 400 shows up. Now, the thing was in impeccable shape, the Atari 800, on all the pictures from Shop Goodwill. But then I got it in, and look what I found. Oh, what have we here? What have we here? Da 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 da. Not too bad looking, but some shipping damage. Yeah, really depressing, but she works beautifully. Daniel and I have already been playing Joust on the Atari 800, and I have all the pieces for it, and I'm going to glue them together and put it back together, and I may just do a show on that. Thank you to my wonderful patrons who you see scrolling across this screen of me playing Defender poorly. If you'd like to join in the fun and get on this illustrious list and possibly help me pay for video game classes so I can actually get good at classic video games, pop on over to patreon.com/10mark, and for as little as $2 a month, you can join this list. And these little bursty guys are the worst things in all of video game history. Will I catch him? I caught the human. Yeah, ha ha ha. Nice job, Doug. Thanks for joining me today. I really appreciate it. Please like the video and comment below telling me all of your Atari stories. I absolutely love to hear stories about your systems and what you did with them as a kid. And let me know also in the comments if you want me to do some more Atari 8-bit coverage. I actually spend a fair amount of time with my Atari 8-bits, my 2600, 5200, and 7800 machines. And you know what? I'm even happy to cover my Atari 1040 ST with a blanket so I don't have to look at that travesty. But until next time, this is Doug from 10 Minute Atari Retro Cast, signing out.